Okay, now let's invite Ms. Geetha Rubasundram to share her insight on the topic. Women's leadership in good governance, creating inclusive and accountable institutions. Over to you, Ms. Geetha.
Thank you very much. Okay, first and foremost, MIM. Yeah. MIM, thank you very much for organizing this well-needed topic. And it's something that I think is very crucial to our development. And the title that we're actually going to be talking about now, the scope that we are looking at now, is very relevant to every one of us in this room, regardless of our role, regardless of our background, and where we stand. I'm going to start my presentation and end my presentation with the same question, but I want you to reflect on a couple of things as I go along. Today, if your child or someone who is close to you comes to you and asks you, should I go against another person who is powerful to stand up for what is right, what would you truly advise them? It's a tough one to answer because you know how difficult it's going to be, but you also know what is the right thing to do, but you also know the challenges and the risk that the person is taking on. And that is going to be my opening question today, because that's what institutions is all about. We can have the best possible, frameworks and concepts, rules, name it. But if you are not going to genuinely implement it, what is going to happen? Let me give you a quick example before I really get into this. In organizations today, literally every organization will talk about whistleblowing hotlines, about speaking up. But when an employee actually speaks up, how many of these organizations stand by their employees? How many of y'all, or even say, for example, even within the HR department, are really going to stand by the employee? I've been there. I've been on those boards. I have seen what has happened. I have done it. I have been ostracized. The moment that everyone looks at you funnily, because they're not sure whether you're going to win, you're not going to win, whether you're going to get kicked out. There's the risk of insubordination just because you're 1 minute late to work. You name it. They've got excuses to kick you out. And then you think to yourself, oh no, I need a career. It's a small industry. I don't want to risk this. That is where the issue is going to start. So, since I'm already talking about it from that angle, just to put the perspective of what I consider as institutions, I'm going to break it up into 3 areas. The political side of it, economics, obviously, the economical side of it, as well as the social part of it. And then, part of my study for my PhD was also corruption. And what I really found was this: corruption impacted all 3 institutions. The moment I introduced corruption to that model of that other 3 institutions, it changed the relationship. In countries which had somewhat good governance, the political scenario played a significant part in setting the right tone. But the moment there was corruption within the political front, guess what? Economic governance stepped in. And that economic governance, based on companies, based on all the non-organizations that we could possibly have, took a very, very strong role in terms of also mediating the relationship between the political governance and social governance. Meaning in the sense that, yes, we can change culture. Corruption can change culture. Corruption can change the way we are doing a lot of things. So I look at corruption as an institution as well. Now, at no point am I condoning and saying it's right. I'm not. I'm just saying that it has a significant impact that we need to address. But you know what? Culture, to a certain extent, as a social institution, can change. It can move backwards, it can move forwards, it depends on the leadership. Why? Because we are like that. In Malaysia, we call it as lalang. We go, we're doing. So when we had people who were actually pushing forward this agenda, we were all like, oh, yes, let's do it. But the moment that we needed to take a few steps back just because we wanted certain projects or certain acceptances, everybody changed. You have a lot of keyboard warriors, but how many are willing to stand up like what Cynthia has done? And where, one thing in Malaysia, I must say, we have a lot of strong women leaders, role models that we can all look up to that, walk the talk. More than men, to be honest. Can we go to the next? Yeah. So coming back towards this, I would say women play a significant role, not because we're being discriminated, not because of anything, but because of our strong roles in our families, among our friends, in our professional networks. Now, I'm going to say, when we talk about good governance, is it just about a gender? No. I'll talk about my profession. Accountants. They're probably going to throw me out. But the point is this, when I was working, I've worked in many organizations. And there's always that, that little thing about, we are running a business, It's about as long as you meet the bare minimum, that checkbox mentality, we're good to go. As long as we don't have the risk of non-compliance, we're good to go. I've had scenarios where I was actually, being intimidated to sign on certain documents that I was not going to. Why? They needed the money, and they came up with a very fraudulent way in terms of how to come up with contracts. Guess what? That entire group, I would say maybe there was about 10 companies within that group itself. I was the only female finance manager. My group CFO was male. So they thought that I would be the nice, sweet one that, they could bully. Then they met me. They learned their lessons fast enough. It took me 2 years for them to even take me seriously. The first time, it was very intimidating. Why? Because imagine all these men sitting in front of you, making you feel that you're not doing your job. And you're not being part of the group. You're not getting the group out of, the financial constraints. But actually, you're doing what's right. And how many women, and I'll be frank with you, at that point of my life, I was quite young still, I would have appreciated someone who was going to stand with me. I didn't have that. So coming back towards this, now my question is, we've had many years of these discussions, right? Where do we stand? We've got the SDG goals. Is it working? We've got all these initiatives and grants and things like that. But today, especially post-COVID, if you actually take a look at some of the reports, we're not doing too well. And then we compare that to how Malaysia is actually doing. Can we go to the next slide? This is from UN Women. There's about 28 countries where 30 women have served as head of states or government. So even within the highest positions of power, we're not there. And this is probably not going to be reached for another 130 years. That's a long way to go. And likewise, I think Dr. Maslas also had mentioned this earlier, some of the commonly held portfolios, we get women for women. And apart from that, of course, you have all the other things, but it's very stereotyped. Are we saying that women are only good for certain areas? No. The answer is we can be anything that we want, but it's because of the culture. Next slide, please. These are some of the things also from the Sustainable Development Goals. But basically what it tells you is the glass ceiling is still very much there. Next slide. And now we talk about Malaysia, where we are. The top 2 screenshots and images over there is just what happened this week. Our boardrooms and B Corp itself. Well, what he has done is, it's very nice to see that. But my question is going to be this. We've reached great heights with this. Great. And I'll be frank, one thing we have to say about Malaysia is women are shining. And we've got opportunities, and we're also given opportunities. But the question is, are we going down the right path? Are we taking the right things in mind? Next slide. And this is the question I'm going to come back. Do we truly have a greater moral compass? Next slide. I did a pilot study. Because this question was bugging me. Are we truly more honest? Are we truly more accountable? Are we truly more transparent? And do we really scrutinize for details? Because that's the mindset, right? Everybody has, that women do that. So what I did was basically, I used like a prisoner's dilemma kind of a concept, and I asked questions to women. This is a pilot study, and I'm just going to show a couple of things. I noticed that there was a huge difference in perception depending on age. If the women were between 40 to 61, they were very clear and precise in their answers. This was an interview as well, so I'm telling you, they were very clear and precise. For them, it was doing the right thing. There was no compromise. But for the women between the ages of 18 and 39, they were smart enough. They said, let us take a look at the situation and we'll tell you how we're going to deal with it. They knew what they were doing. You know what was the significance of this? All the participants were people who had thorough knowledge in, governance, anti-corruption, legal perspectives, you name it, but they knew what they were talking about. So they knew loopholes within the system, they knew how the legal system would work, the judiciary system would work, they knew everything. Next slide. These were some of the questions. You'll be able to see if they share the slides later. But basically, I asked questions in understanding what would you consider as corruption. I'll give you a simple scenario. I gave them the exact same scenario. The only thing I differentiated was the persons involved. One was a political figure, the other was a businessman. You know what? They discriminated more against the political figure than the businessman. For the businessman, they were like, oh, that's normal. Is that right? Next slide. So the main thing that I'm just going to say is this. Most of the respondents were biased. So it was someone who was involved with us, someone who was personal to us, we were not going to actually come across as being the person who's going to throw them in. And what was most important was also this. Even if they had been guilty of certain things and they knew there was a possibility that they could be hauled into court as well, they chose not to self-incriminate. Why? Because they said, well, if the law is such that we know for a fact we can get away with it, if we know there's insufficient evidence, or we know for a fact that the burden of proof is not going to be sufficient, why do this to ourselves? So those are the things that we need to look at. And apart from that, the other thing I'm going to say is this: culture. They were receptive to having small gifts, certain gifts, because they say it's part of our culture to receive these kind of gifts. They said, what's wrong with that? Why are we following the Western mindset that all gifts are wrong? There's also that mindset in terms of, should I be a whistleblower? They were more aware of their rights. And with this, I also asked them the significant question in terms of, would they also be embroiled in a certain scandal if they knew the monetary benefits were going to be more? Answer was yes. Especially if the risk went down, the risk of getting caught. I mean, let's be frank. The moment you're going to do something wrong, that's the first question you ask, right? What would I do if I get caught? Next slide. So this is some of the things that I want to talk about, because today we are all focused on, training and education in terms of ethics, good governance, internal controls, investigations, you name it. So people are aware of what you're looking for. They know what you're going to be looking for. Like say, for example, even if you look at a certain financial statement and you're overall looking at maybe a ratio analysis and the trends and patterns, they know how to manipulate everything. They know how to get rid of documents. They know how to come up with documents. So what I'm just trying to say is, yes, education is definitely a driver, awareness is definitely a driver, but we also need to understand that this may not necessarily mean that we are fighting the battle in the right way. We also need to understand that with this increased education and awareness, people also know how to manipulate the system. Now, how does this come back to women? Next slide, please. Why is it that women are considered to be not so corrupt? Number one, as what we, in the earlier session as well, they had brought up about networking. Even if you look at it from a board perspective, how many of these women are really, truly one of the boys? How many of them can really tap into that network? And just like what Cynthia had mentioned just now, are they really being there because of their backgrounds? Or are they there because of a quota system? Like in Malaysia, here we have that 30% quota. Which one of it? And we also have to look at it in terms of the business considerations, the moral considerations, and how that is going to work. So as women continue to break that glass ceiling, yes, it's good, wonderful to see that kind of a development. As younger women take on greater challenges, that's also great. But what happens when they start having that power by themselves? And we've seen some of the recent financial the financial frauds headed by women. So it's there. Next slide. In conclusion, is this. It's great seeing all these perspectives. It's wonderful for all of us to come together, but I'm going to conclude with this. Do we genuinely believe in good governance? And at which point did we move from black and white? I mean, when we were children, what were we taught about? Lying is wrong, right? Then you grew up. And they tell you that little white lies, it's okay. And then that part of it moved. So this is where we need to re-look at governance. Is diversity, these quota systems, are they really there? Are we truly addressing the elephant in the room? Are we truly addressing the issues on hand? Do these women have the skill set? Do they have the knowledge? And are they able to speak up? Are they shut down the moment that they open their mouths? Are they victimized, or do they pretend to be victimized? That is also the other angle that we need to look at, especially when we're coming up with all these policies, initiatives. It needs to be a bit more holistic. And let us also remember one thing. In Malaysia, our culture, if you look at Hofstede's culture dimensions, there is one dimension called power distance, which basically says how much we actually accept disparities. Guess what? We do very well. We score 100 over 100. Well done, Malaysia. But yeah, but how much of that has really changed? So this is where when we talk, when we speak up, people applaud a lot of things, but how many of them are actually going to do it on their own benefit? And again, I'm going to come back to that question that I started off the session. What would you advise your loved ones? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Geetha. I can't say more than fully agree with her, the importance of creating accountable institutions. Okay, this is the gist of the whole thing. But the challenge is always how to create the accountable institutions. We all want accountable institutions in every sphere of our life. But for a country like Malaysia, which is still a very young country, okay, creating accountable institutions is always a great challenge. And she have covered quite a lot on governance, okay? She started off with whether the staff, what kind of support a staff will be able to get if the person stands up. Okay, this is a culture in most of the companies. At the beginning, you will, even union members, at the beginning you might get support, but the moment the top management is against you, you will find the whole company turns against you. And many unionists face this challenge. Okay, so The other thing is about stereotyping and the type of jobs women does. I personally, as a male, I always feel sometimes the woman is also equally responsible. They tend to have certain favorite positions that they always tend to move to. But of course, there are equally number of very dynamic women today who is willing to take on any task. Okay, I think that should be appreciated as well. Yeah. And she brought up a very good example of what's happened recently about Berjaya Group. It's actually very interesting about, since I've done quite a fair bit of work with Berjaya as well. Okay, so in Malaysia, sometimes we always have this so-called concept of shadow directors, shadow owners, the shadow person who is actually controlling the companies. So a lot of, especially GLCs, you will see the board of directors and you will see, what do you call it, the senior management, the MD. But the actual person who is actually making the decision will be somebody completely different. So it's nice to have even some very big companies. You can see a person who is, it's only happened in Malaysia, I don't know about other countries, you will be better than. A person who has no position at all in that company, in the middle of the night or at 10 o'clock at night, will give a phone call to the managing director and say, this is what you have to do. This is how you should go about it. But if you look at the hierarchy of the positions, the person is not there at all. He's not even a member of the board of directors, he's not even a chairman or not even an executive level, but you see that. So in Malaysia, when we talk about diversity, we need to always look at, but I think that is also true in certain other countries. Okay. She brought up a very good point. What would you consider as corruption? What would you consider as corruption? That's something for us to ponder about. Okay. The other thing is about culture of giving gifts. This is some sort of culture which is very prevalent in Asia, because most of the Asian countries, we tend to follow a bit of Chinese culture, Chinese business culture, because majority of the business, whether we like it or not, is still, the majority businessmen are still Chinese, whether it's in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, whatever, so even Philippines. Okay, so the culture is still there, so question of dinners, your karaoke's and your, is part of the culture, is something that we need to really look at in terms of governance. And she also mentioned about power, which is, I think, is a very, very big issue. The power, who controls the power distance especially. Okay. And also the other thing she mentioned, which also of interest to me, was the moment the political governance collapse, economic and social governance collapse as well, tend to follow the lead of the political governance. Okay, that was nice. It was a very interesting sharing from Ms. Geetha. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Geetha and Ms. Cynthia, for the informative sharing. Now we will have our panel discussion. I would like to, for this panel discussion, I would like to open to even the audience so that we can, I'm sure there are many, many people have many interesting questions and like to get insight, because it's not always we have two person who is so much involved with this area can enlighten us. Okay, so I will open the panel discussion to the floor as well. If there is any member of the floor who would like to ask any question, feel free to just mention a name and ask. Okay.
Hello. Thank you so much. Indeed, I'm speechless. I don't know how to say. So many things I would like to tell. Actually, it's Honorable Prof. Shima. My long name is Professor Nur Hashima Muhammad Yassin. I'm from National Assembly University, Faculty of Laws. In fact, I'm so happy and honored to be in front of the panelists especially, because this is my area of research and interest. I'm the author of the 2 books on money laundering. Yeah, please buy my book, promotion as well. My daughter is Norala. She's doing a PhD on corruption as well. So perhaps Ms. Geetha, you might have a discussion with her. But she's a bit introvert though, yeah? So I have to speak on her behalf. Well, speaking about what they call it just now, this is favorite word now, speaking culture. I'm forcing myself to speak up. Yeah, especially let me start with because all this while we have a very ugly and gloomy notes. Yeah, let me start with a new legal reform that we done our PMX, our dear Anwar Ibrahim, my former president of the UIA, my good friend. He has come up. I'm sure everybody knows about the amendment to the Federal Constitution. I'm sure all the legal persons should know as regards to. Anwar have agreed to enable automatic citizenship for children born overseas to Malaysian moms. I'm so happy about it because I happen to be, because I'm married to an Englishman, so I'm quite worried to be born to my daughter in England because then my daughter will not get automatic citizenship. But this is a big applause to PMX, yeah, at least with a good reform that he has done, how long he has been in power, yeah? At least he has shown a little bit of legal reform, yeah? That's it, that's number one. Okay, coming back to the speak up culture, yeah? Because my students, yeah? I have got more than 5 students doing on corruption and money laundering and they're about commercial crime. One of my recent students, who are waiting for the Viva, inshallah maybe next month, she has written on whistleblower, yeah? Whistleblowers Act. And the case that we have mentioned as NFC, our YB Rafizi Ramli, very long case citation. And because you remember what was the judgment? The judge said that because you whistle, you don't whistle, but you whistle a trumpet. So in Malaysia we cannot whistle. We cannot do a whistle. We have, that because of too much. Because the channel in Malaysia is that. That's why we have to do the legal reform for Whistleblowers Act that the right channel should go to the relevant authorities. And the relevant authorities is not in our hand. Yeah. So anyway, I'm totally agree with you all. That's why this is basically my sharing session as well. And secondly, as you mentioned about women, yeah, how far women as a leader can avoid or can mitigate the corruption. As I perceive, based on my research and observation, if you look as to the CPI, yeah, Corruption Perception Index, Malaysian, I don't know how you agree or not, we are 60-something, right? So on the above of the list is like like New Zealand, Germany, yeah? And all the leaders used to be women, right? Like who's that lady, Jacinta, right? New Zealand, and now I don't know what happened. She stepped down, maybe to go more on family matters, right? Okay, but that can be on certain extent. Women make a good leaders because I'm sure I can be a good leader. But on the secondly, based on the research done by my daughter, MACC, yeah, or SPRM, based on their research and finding, 80% of the charge of the corruption cases in Malaysia are all male species. So that's a good news for ladies because 80% are all male. So ladies are very much on the back seat, maybe not on the case law yet. Yeah, so that's a good news for ladies. Claps for the ladies. Yeah, women empowerment. Yeah, that's a good news. Yeah. Of course, based on my, can I be long? Because I'm a lecturer, so lecturer always like to, I'm a lawyer myself. So I hope I've got time. Yeah, okay, this is for women, yeah. Thank you very much, brothers. Okay, and thirdly, I would like to share also, I've done research, this is a very closed door, yeah? You don't tell anyone. It's a corruption among the civil servants, especially the law enforcement agencies though. I don't have to mention the exact agency, but you can guess. Basically, well, just like I like to concur with our lawyer friend, Bahrain, yeah? You know, I'm going to Bahrain, inshallah, because my brother is there, yeah? So, very much biased, though. The respondents, basically all these are legal officers of the legal enforcement agencies, very famous in Malaysia. They dare not to mention that they about corruption. They say no, no, all no, no. Have you taken corruption? No. Have you familiar with corruption? No, all no. They never admit that they have taken because for them this is culture. Why not? If everybody can take it, why not? You know, they don't find it is a corruption. It's just a gift. In Malay, minyak pelinci lah, minyak kopi lah, minyak apa? Macam-macam kan? Apa panggil air kopi, apa panggil? Under the table kan? Sogokan kan? So it's not a corruption. After all, we don't want it. You give us. So jangan tolak rezeki kan? Macam kucing kan? Ya, saya speak Malay lah. Okay. So in fact, yeah, I have so much discussion. Yeah, if I can, but then I think I just need your views and comment on this. Thank you so much and well done to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you so much for that point. I think you should have been on the panel. You mentioned so many important things, and I don't have any comment except perhaps many of the things Geetha mentioned are things that we are working on separately and together. And some things that perhaps I might want to consider exploring for the future also is about corporate leadership and corporate governance and where we can go with that to actually instill a better anti-corruption policy and governance framework, especially with GLCs. So I think we've heard a lot about the malpractices that occur there, partly because there's a lack of accountability. There's a secrecy framework. We are governed by the Official Secrets Act, and we don't have information laws to actually call out for data, for information, and so on. So you have been doing a lot of trainings and so on, but what I just think coming out from this conversation, apart from gender mainstreaming policies, is to actually look at corporate fraud, but not being so blatant about it, but actually looking at how corporate leaders can be better made aware so that changes around behavior, changes around culture, changes around looking at vulnerable populations, especially women, should be something that if you're already doing it, then that's really fantastic, but how to step it up a bit more.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Cynthia. Ms. Geetha, you want to add on something before we...
Yeah, thank you. You brought up so many great points, and like what Cynthia said, I think you should have joined us here as well. Thank you. And kudos to your daughter. That's also a very, very significant area that we need to be looking at as well. Now, that is exactly what I was trying to say. There's so many gray areas that we are unsure about that, we think that we can solve this entire problem about governance and corruption just like that with a little framework. It's exactly, I will say this, when we look at whistleblowing acts across the world, you can put every single clause inside that and make it look so attractive. But that one small little point of how you can lose your protection takes away the glamour of the whole thing, to me. That really just takes away the glamour, the reality. The ground reality is this. Take a look around us, internationally or even locally. How many whistleblowers do you know have been penalized? They've even lost their lives. That could be us. So if you're going to go down that path of saying, no, I don't want to invite problems, this is going to be someone else's problem. Remember, one day that can be you. One day that can be your family member who's being prosecuted. who's losing their jobs, or worse, losing their lives. So that is what we need. And as I said, as much as we are saying that women are not not involved, let's also remember that one little question that I asked earlier. Is it because they're truly, having that moral compass? Or is it because they just are not part of the network and they lack that opportunity? Are we going to change? Let's take a look. Okay, I'm going to be a bit more okay, I don't want to be discriminative. But I'll ask you a question. We've heard people talking about women in high positions, their attitudes, how assertive they are, or like what you mentioned earlier, that word aggressive, this morning. And of course, that's still polite words that they're using, very polite words. We all know what are the other words that they use. Is that allowed? Why is it that when we stand up, there are all these things being thrown at us? Are we supposed to be, putting across a very feminine approach? Or do we need to dress accordingly? I still remember this one particular scenario in one of the, my earlier days. And this was in a male-dominated industry, where it was acceptable for men to give certain offers. And if you're junior enough and you take it, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Let me assure you on that part of it. And guess what? Guess what was the advice that was given to me? If everyone was to dress appropriately, by the way, I was wearing exactly something like this. If everyone was to dress appropriately, men would not look at women. That is governance to me. Obviously in the wrong way, but to me, that is governance. So my question is this: we can talk about it from a financial crime point of view, we can talk about it from a cultural point of view, we can talk about it from so many angles. But let's go back to the core. Where's the support? In true angles, are we really being supported? And do women support each other? I think that is something that we also need to bring to the board. As much, it's good. The wives in this room is wonderful because, everybody's so positive. We're all standing together with each other. But we've also worked in environments where the women are the ones who are going to bring you down. And that's scary. So just to concur with that part of it.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Geetha.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Ms. Cynthia Gabriel, Ms. Geetha Rubasundram, and Mr. Titus for the insightful session. Kindly remain in front. I would like to invite Puan Rahimah Ibrahim, member of the Board of Directors of the Malaysian Institute of Management, to come to the front to present a token of appreciation to Ms. Cynthia Gabriel and Ms. Geetha Rubasundram.